Let's talk about something. What if our entire modern conversation about gender equality is kind of built on a huge mistake? Today, we're diving into a really provocative argument, the idea that in our rush to make the genders equal, we've somehow confused that with making them identical. And what if that confusion is actually holding us back from our greatest strengths?
So this is the big idea from our source material. Just let that sink in for a second. It's not saying one is better than the other. It's saying that trying to make them the same is the wrong game. Instead, it's pushing for a different kind of equality, one that's based on how important each one is, not on how similar they are. This is the nut we're going to crack today.
And this really is the central question, isn't it? What if a ton of our social friction, all this tension, comes from just a simple mix-up in words? Have we been so busy trying to prove that men and women are basically interchangeable that we've totally missed the point? That maybe, just maybe, their greatest power is in how different they are.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. We're going to start with what the source calls the sameness fallacy, the problem itself. Then we'll look at the proposed solution, this idea of equality of importance. From there, we'll dig into the evidence, looking at how nature itself seems to operate, and then a really surprising historical case study, the Spartan paradox. And finally, we'll see how all this could change the game today, moving us from competition to collaboration.
All right, first up, the sameness fallacy. The argument here is that for decades, our culture has been trying to kind of paper over the real deep-seated biological and psychological differences between men and women. The goal? Equality. Totally noble. But the method was to insist that we're all the same. The source claims this isn't just a simple mistake. It's practically a denial of who we fundamentally are.
You know that old saying about judging a fish on its ability to climb a tree? Well, that's exactly what this is about. It's not just unfair, it's pointless. The argument is that when we demand that men and women be equal by doing the exact same things in the exact same ways, we just set everyone up to fail. We don't get excellence. We get this bland, middle-of-the-road version that doesn't really serve anybody.
Okay, so if trying to be the same is a dead end, then what's the answer? Well, this brings us to the real core of the argument, equality of importance. The idea is actually pretty simple, but it's powerful. Difference does not automatically mean one is better than the other. Two things can be completely, fundamentally different and yet be perfectly equal in their value.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Look at this. On one side, you've got the sameness model, where value means you're interchangeable, like parts on an assembly line. But on the other side, you've got this world of complementary parts, where your value comes from what makes you unique. The source is really pushing us to shift our thinking from one model to the other.
And to make it really click, the source gives us some awesome analogies. Think about the sun and the moon. Totally different, right? But both are absolutely essential. Or a violin and a cello. You need both for a symphony. My favorite, though, is the foundation and the roof. They do opposite jobs. You can't swap them. But a building is completely useless without both. They're different, but they're equally important.
So where did this idea of different but equal even come from? Well, the argument is that it wasn't some philosopher's idea. It was hammered into us by the brutal reality of survival. And that brings us to nature's survival strategy, the idea that these different roles aren't just made up, they were an evolutionary must-have.
I mean, think about it. In the world our ancestors lived in, being the same would have been a death sentence. You needed specialists. The source calls this the perimeter versus core theory. The masculine role was the perimeter, high risk, dangerous, focused on protecting the group and bringing back resources. The feminine role was the core, the long-term investment, the biological heart of the tribe, the ones ensuring there is a next generation.
And the stakes? They were absolute. If that perimeter failed, everyone got eaten or killed right then and there. But if the core failed, the tribe just died out. A slower death for sure, but just as final. Their jobs were different, but their importance was identical. The way the source puts it is so good. One role provided the means to live, and the other provided the reason to live.
And you know what? Biology itself seems to back this up. It's like nature made a different bet with each sex. Male reproductive cells, they're plentiful, cheap, designed for quantity and competition. But female reproductive cells, they're rare, expensive, and require a massive biological investment. The source argues that if nature just wanted identical function, we'd just clone ourselves. But it didn't. It shows this friction of difference because it creates stronger outcomes.
So does this whole theory actually hold up in the real world? The source points to a super interesting and maybe unexpected case study.
Ancient Sparta. Yeah, we think of them as this ultimate warrior culture, but it turns out they also had this profound balance of distinct, yet equally powerful gender roles.
Just look at this breakdown. It's wild. Spartan men were the wall of the city. Their entire lives from childhood were about war. But while the men were off being the wall, who was running the show back home? The women. They controlled the land, the money, the whole culture. It was a completely different kind of power, but it was absolutely power. We tend to think that if you're not holding a sword, you're not powerful. Sparta tells a different story.
And this quote, wow. When Queen Gorgo was asked why Spartan women were the only ones who could rule men, this was her answer. She's not saying because we're just like you. She's claiming a completely unique and fundamental power. The Spartans got it. The warrior and the matriarch were not the same, but the survival of their entire society depended on the absolute strength of both.
Okay, so ancient history, evolutionary biology. What does any of this have to do with us right now in our daily lives? Well, that's where we're going next. How all this can shift our relationships from a constant competition to a real collaboration.
The source argues that this sameness model forces us all onto this vertical ladder. It's a constant climb, a constant fight for who's on top. It's all about competition. But this alternative model, it flips the whole thing on its side. It's not a ladder, it's a bridge. It's not about who's above or below. It's about working together side by side to get across. And this analogy just nails it. A lock and a key. They're completely different. They're designed for opposite but perfectly complementary jobs. The lock doesn't wish it were a key. The key doesn't look down on the lock. They are totally useless on their own. But together, they can open doors. They collaborate.
And this gets us to what the source says true respect really is. It isn't about pretending we're all the same. It's the exact opposite. It's looking at someone who is fundamentally different from you and saying, you have something of immense value that I don't have, and because of that, you are irreplaceable.
And that's really the perfect metaphor to tie this all up, isn't it? The goal is a symphony. You have violins playing the melody, you have drums keeping the beat. If the violin starts trying to be a drum, the music just falls apart. The real value isn't in imitation, it's in creating harmony.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. What if we've been chasing the wrong thing this whole time? What if the real measure of our value isn't found in how well we can imitate someone else, but in what makes us truly, fundamentally irreplaceable? That's the idea. Thanks for tuning into this explainer.